The massive iron gates of the Ashford estate creaked open as another luxury car pulled into the circular driveway. Inside the gleaming white mansion, chaos ruled despite its perfect appearance. 17-year-old Isabella Ashford sat at the mahogany dining table, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, staring down at a plate of perfectly prepared salmon and vegetables. "Isabella, you must eat something," pleaded Dr. Morrison, the family's private physician. He had been visiting the house daily for the past 3 weeks, each time leaving more concerned than before. The young woman before him had lost nearly 30 pounds, her once glowing complexion now pale and drawn. Richard Ashford paced behind his daughter's chair, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the marble floor. As the founder and CEO of Ashford Industries, he was used to solving problems with money and influence. But his daughter's mysterious refusal to eat had left him feeling helpless for the first time in decades. "We've tried everything," he said, running his hands through his graying hair. "5-star chefs, her favorite foods, nutritionists, therapists. Nothing works. She just sits there and won't touch anything." Isabella's mother, Catherine, dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "She's wasting away before our eyes. Our beautiful daughter." Her voice trailed off as fresh tears began to flow. The Ashford family had built their fortune in real estate and technology investments. Their mansion sat on 50 acres of perfectly manicured grounds in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. Every room was decorated with priceless art and antiques. The family owned a fleet of luxury cars, a private jet, and vacation homes in 3 countries. But all their wealth meant nothing when their only child refused to eat. Dr. Morrison checked his notes again. "The medical tests show no physical problems. Her blood work is normal, aside from the effects of malnutrition. This appears to be psychological, but she won't speak to any of the counselors we've brought in." Isabella remained silent, her green eyes fixed on something beyond the dining room windows. She had not spoken more than a few words to anyone in weeks. The vibrant, talkative teenager who had once filled the house with laughter and music had seemingly vanished overnight. "What about hospitalization?" Catherine asked desperately. "Surely they can force her to eat." "We could consider tube feeding," Dr. Morrison replied carefully. "But given her age and the lack of immediate medical emergency, it would be difficult to justify against her will. And the psychological trauma could make things worse." Richard slammed his fist on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "There has to be something we can do. I didn't build this empire to watch my daughter starve herself." The family had exhausted every option their money could buy. They had flown in specialists from around the world, consulted with the best psychiatric hospitals, and even tried alternative treatments. Nothing had worked. Isabella continued her silent protest against food, growing thinner and weaker each day. Outside the dining room, the household staff went about their duties with heavy hearts. The Ashfords employed 12 full-time staff members, including housekeepers, gardeners, a cook, and personal assistants. They had all watched Isabella grow up, and her current condition affected them deeply. In the kitchen, Maria Santos wiped down the counters for the 3rd time that afternoon. She had been the head housekeeper for the Ashford family for 8 years, arriving each morning at 6 and leaving after dinner was served. At 34, she was a single mother who had immigrated from Guatemala to provide a better life for her own daughter. Maria had tried to stay out of family business, as she had been trained to do. But watching Isabella waste away was breaking her heart. She remembered the little girl who used to sneak into the kitchen for cookies and help her dust the furniture. Isabella had always been kind to the staff, unlike many wealthy children Maria had encountered in her years of domestic work. "Any change today?" asked James, the family's longtime butler, as he entered the kitchen. Maria shook her head sadly. She didn't even look at breakfast. "Mrs. Ashford is beside herself, and Mr. Ashford is threatening to fire everyone if we can't figure out how to help." "It's not our place," James reminded her gently. "The family has doctors and specialists. We're just the help." But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Isabella's behavior than anyone understood. She had grown up in poverty, where food was precious and hunger was a real threat. The idea of someone choosing not to eat when surrounded by abundance was foreign to her, but she sensed there was pain behind Isabella's actions. That evening, As Maria prepared to leave for the day, she heard raised voices from the family room. Through the partially open door, she could see the Ashfords in heated discussion with Dr. Morrison and what appeared to be another specialist. The insurance company is questioning the continued home visits, the new doctor was saying. If she doesn't show improvement soon, we may need to consider more drastic measures. What kind of measures? Catherine's voice was strained. Involuntary commitment to a psychiatric facility. It's not ideal, but if her life is in danger, Maria's breath caught. She thought of her own 15-year-old daughter, Rosa, and how devastated she would be if separated from her family during a crisis. Something deep inside her knew that removing Isabella from her home was not the answer. As she gathered her things to leave, Maria made a decision that would change everything. Instead of heading straight to the bus stop as usual, she climbed the grand staircase to the second floor. She had never ventured into the family's private quarters uninvited, but something told her this was important. Isabella's bedroom door was slightly ajar. Maria could see the teenager sitting by her window, staring out at the darkening sky. She looked so small and fragile in her oversized pajamas, nothing like the confident young woman she had been just months ago. Maria knocked softly. "Miss Isabella, may I come in?" There was no response, but Isabella didn't object either. Maria pushed the door open and stepped into the luxurious bedroom. The space was larger than Maria's entire apartment, with a four-poster bed, sitting area, and walk-in closet bigger than most bedrooms. "I brought you some warm milk," Maria said quietly, setting a simple ceramic mug on the nightstand. It wasn't true. She had just thought of the excuse, but she needed a reason to be there. Isabella turned slightly, acknowledging Maria's presence for the first time in weeks. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, now seemed hollow and distant. "I know it's not my place to ask," Maria continued, settling into the chair across from Isabella, "but I'm worried about you." "We all are." For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then, barely above a whisper, Isabella spoke her first words in days. "You don't understand. Nobody understands." Maria leaned forward, keeping her voice gentle. "Try me." Isabella's composure finally cracked. Tears began streaming down her face as months of buried pain came pouring out. "They think I'm just being dramatic. They think I can just snap out of it, and everything will be fine. But it's not fine. Nothing is fine." "What happened, Mija?" Maria asked, using the Spanish term of endearment she called her own daughter. "I overheard them," Isabella sobbed. "My parents. They were talking about me like I was some kind of investment that wasn't paying off. Mom said I was becoming an embarrassment to the family name. Dad said maybe they should have had more children so they wouldn't be stuck with just me." Maria's heart ached for the girl. She understood now, this wasn't about food at all. It was about feeling unloved and unwanted despite being surrounded by material wealth. "They have specialists and doctors, but nobody actually talks to me," Isabella continued. "They just want to fix me like I'm a broken appliance. Nobody asks what I need or how I feel. They just keep throwing money at the problem." As Isabella spoke, Maria began to understand the depth of her pain. The teenager had been struggling with depression and feelings of inadequacy for months, but her parents had been too busy with their business empire to notice. When Isabella had tried to talk to them about her feelings, they had dismissed her concerns as typical teenage drama. The final straw had come when Isabella overheard her parents discussing her future at a dinner party. They had talked about her like she was a commodity, planning her life without any input from her. The realization that her own parents saw her as a burden rather than a beloved daughter had sent her into a spiral of despair. "So I stopped eating," Isabella whispered. "It was the only thing I could control. The only way to make them pay attention." Maria understood completely. In her culture, refusing food was often a way of showing deep emotional distress. But she also knew that this path would only lead to more pain for everyone involved. "Your parents love you," Maria said carefully. "They're just scared and don't know how to help." "They love the idea of me," Isabella corrected. "The perfect daughter who makes them look good at charity events. But they don't love the real me. The one who gets sad sometimes, who doesn't want to follow their exact plan for my life." As the evening wore on, Maria listened as Isabella poured out months of accumulated hurt and frustration. She talked about the pressure to be perfect, the loneliness of being an only child in a house full of staff but empty of real connection, and the fear that her parents would never truly see her as more than an extension of their own success. Maria shared some of her own story, how she had left everything behind to give her daughter a better life, how she worked multiple jobs to provide opportunities she had never had. But she also talked about the importance of family, of communication, and of finding ways to heal broken relationships. Your parents don't know how to show love the way you need it, Maria explained. But that doesn't mean they don't love you. Sometimes people who have everything still don't know what's truly important. As midnight approached, something had shifted in the room. Isabella was still in pain, still struggling, but she was no longer completely alone with her feelings. For the first time in weeks, she had been heard and understood by another human being. Maria knew she was overstepping her bounds as an employee, but she also knew that sometimes the most important interventions came from unexpected places. As she prepared to leave, she made another decision that would prove crucial in the days to come. The next morning brought another round of failed breakfast attempts. Isabella sat at the dining table while her parents watched anxiously, but the untouched plate told the same story as every meal for the past month. Dr. Morrison arrived at his usual time, his face growing more concerned as he checked Isabella's vital signs and, wait, she's lost another 2 pounds, he informed Richard and Catherine privately in the hallway. We're approaching a critical point. I strongly recommend immediate hospitalization. Catherine gasped, clutching her pearl necklace. Surely it hasn't come to that. She's just going through a phase. Mrs. Ashford, your daughter has lost over 35 pounds. Her body is beginning to consume muscle tissue to survive. This is no longer a phase, it's a medical emergency. Richard's face was grim as he absorbed the doctor's words. How long do we have? If she doesn't start eating within the next few days, we'll have no choice but to intervene. I've already contacted Mount Sinai's psychiatric unit about availability. As the adults discussed Isabella's fate in hushed tones, the teenager herself sat alone in the sunroom, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that now hung loose on her diminished frame. She could hear fragments of their conversation and felt a familiar wave of despair wash over her. They were still treating her like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood. Maria arrived for work that morning with a heavy heart. She had spent the previous evening thinking about her conversation with Isabella, torn between her desire to help and her position as household staff. She knew that wealthy families like the Ashfords typically didn't welcome input from their employees on personal matters. Throughout the day, Maria found herself watching Isabella whenever she could. The young woman moved through the house like a ghost, pale and silent, avoiding the concerned looks of her parents and the worried whispers of the staff. It was clear that whatever small progress had been made the night before was fragile at best. As evening approached, Maria made her way to the kitchen to prepare her excuse for visiting Isabella again. She warmed fresh milk in a small saucepan, adding a touch of honey and vanilla, the way her own grandmother had made it for her during difficult times in Guatemala. This time, when Maria knocked on Isabella's bedroom door, the young woman was waiting for her. I wasn't sure you'd come back, Isabella said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I keep my promises, Maria replied, settling into the same chair as the night before. How are you feeling today? Isabella's laugh was bitter, like a lab rat. They poked and measured me all morning, then spent the afternoon discussing my future like I wasn't even here. Dr. Morrison wants to put me in a psychiatric hospital. Maria set the warm milk on the nightstand, closer to Isabella this time. What do you want? The question seemed to surprise Isabella. What do I want? Nobody's asked me that in months. I'm asking now. For the first time since her crisis began, Isabella really considered the question. What did she want? It seemed so simple, yet so impossible to achieve. I want my parents to see me, she said finally. Really see me, not just the perfect daughter they created in their minds. I want them to ask me about my dreams instead of telling me what my dreams should be. I want them to love me for who I am, not who they think I should become. And what about eating? Maria asked gently. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. I know I need to eat. Part of me wants to. But every time I try, I think about them watching me, waiting for me to be fixed, and I just can't. It's like my body rebels against giving them what they want when they won't give me what I need. Maria understood more than Isabella realized. As a mother herself, she recognized the complex dynamics at play. The Ashfords loved their daughter, but had somehow lost the ability to communicate that love in a way Isabella could receive it. Meanwhile, Isabella's hunger strike had become both a cry for help and a way to maintain some control over her life. "Tell me about before," Maria said. "Before you stopped eating. What was your relationship with your parents like?" Isabella's eyes grew distant as she remembered. Different, but not necessarily better. They've always been busy with work, with their social obligations. I spent most of my childhood with nannies and tutors. They'd check in on my grades, make sure I was excelling at piano and French, attend my school performances. But we never just talked. What about your friends? Surely you have people your own age you can confide in. You mean the other rich kids at my private school? Isabella's tone was bitter. Half of them are dealing with their own family problems, and the other half just see me as competition. Besides, how do you explain to someone that you're miserable despite having everything money can buy? They'd think I was being ungrateful. Maria began to see the full picture of Isabella's isolation. Surrounded by material wealth, but starved for genuine emotional connection, the teenager had essentially been living in a beautiful prison. Her parents' good intentions and high expectations had created a barrier between them that had grown stronger over the years. "May I ask you something personal?" Isabella said suddenly. "You have a daughter, right? I've seen her picture in the kitchen." Maria nodded. "Rosa. She's 15, just 2 years younger than you. What's she like? Are you close?" A smile crossed Maria's face, the first genuine happiness Isabella had seen from any adult in weeks. "Rosa is stubborn and smart, and sometimes drives me crazy with her music and her mess. But yes, we're close. We talk every day about everything: school, boys, her dreams, my work. Sometimes we argue, but we always work it out." "How?" Isabella asked desperately. "How do you stay close when there's so much that could go wrong?" Maria considered her answer carefully. "I think it's because I listen more than I talk. And I try to remember that she's her own person, not just an extension of me. My dreams for her are important, but her dreams for herself matter more." This concept was revolutionary to Isabella, who had never considered that her parents' dreams for her might not align with her own aspirations. She had been raised to see their expectations as her goals, their success as her purpose. "What does Rosa want to be when she grows up?" Isabella asked. "A teacher," Maria answered proudly. "She wants to work with children who don't speak English well, to help them the way her teachers helped her when we first came here. It's not what I had imagined for her. I hoped maybe she'd become a doctor or lawyer, but when I see how passionate she is about helping others, I know she's found her calling." Isabella was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. "My parents have my entire life planned out. College at Harvard or Yale, then graduate school, then joining the family business. They've never asked me what I want to study or what kind of life I want to live." "What would you choose if you could choose anything?" Maria asked. Isabella's answer came quickly, as if she'd been thinking about it for years. "Art therapy. I want to help kids who can't express their feelings with words. I've always been good at drawing and painting, but my parents think it's just a hobby. They say art doesn't make money, so it's not a real career." "But it's your dream?" "It's been my secret dream since I was 12, Isabella admitted. "I used to sneak art supplies into my room and draw for hours. But when my parents found out, they hired the best art tutors money could buy and turned it into another performance to excel at. They never asked why I loved it or what it meant to me." Maria was beginning to understand the deeper issues at play. The Ashfords had taken their daughter's natural interests and turned them into achievements to display, stripping away the joy and personal meaning that had originally drawn Isabella to art. "Have you ever tried to tell them how you feel about this?" Maria asked. "I tried once about a year ago. I told them I wanted to look at colleges with strong art therapy programs. Dad laughed and said I'd get over it, that I was too smart to waste my life on frivolous pursuits. Mom said that art was fine as a hobby, but that I needed to think practically about my future. And how did that make you feel?" "Invisible," Isabella whispered. "Like they couldn't see who I really was, only who they wanted me to be." As the conversation continued, Maria began to see connections that the expensive doctors and specialists had missed. Isabella's eating disorder wasn't just about food or control. It was about identity, autonomy, and the desperate need to be seen and valued for her authentic self. "I need to tell you something," Maria said carefully. "Your parents are planning to hospitalize you if you don't start eating soon. Dr. Morrison thinks it's the only way to save your life." Isabella's face went pale. "When? Soon. Maybe in the next few days." Terror filled Isabella's eyes. "I can't go there. I can't be locked up with strangers who will try to fix me without understanding me. Please, Maria, there has to be another way." Maria felt the weight of the moment. She was just a housekeeper, but somehow she had become the key to unlocking this family's crisis. An idea began forming in her mind, risky and unconventional, but possibly the only hope for avoiding the trauma of forced hospitalization. "What if we try something different?" Maria suggested. "What if we work together to help your parents understand what you really need? They won't listen to me. They never have. But they might listen to both of us together. And, more importantly, they might listen if we show them instead of just telling them." Isabella looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean that tomorrow night, instead of just talking, we invite your parents to join us. But not for a lecture or a therapy session. For something different." "What kind of different?" Maria's plan was risky, but it came from her heart and her experience as both a mother and an observer of this broken family. "We show them who you really are. Your art, your dreams, your fears. Everything you've been trying to tell them, but they haven't been able to hear." "They'll never agree to that," Isabella protested. "They will if the alternative is watching you get taken away to a hospital," Maria replied. "Sometimes parents need to see their children through someone else's eyes to really understand them." For the first time in weeks, Isabella felt a flicker of hope. It was terrifying to consider being so vulnerable with her parents. But the alternative, being hospitalized and force-fed while her emotional needs remained unaddressed, was even more frightening. "What would I need to do?" Isabella asked. "Start by drinking some of that milk," Maria suggested with a gentle smile. "You're going to need strength for what comes next." Isabella looked at the ceramic mug that had been sitting untouched on her nightstand. Slowly, she reached for it and took a small sip. The warm, sweet liquid felt strange in her mouth after weeks of refusing food, but it also felt like a small act of rebellion against her own despair. "It's good," she said, taking another sip. The morning brought an unexpected development that would accelerate Maria's timeline. Dr. Morrison arrived earlier than usual, accompanied by a social worker and what appeared to be hospital staff. Isabella watched from her bedroom window as the official-looking group gathered on the front steps, their serious expressions telling her everything she needed to know. "They're here to take me away," she whispered to herself, panic rising in her chest. Downstairs, Richard and Catherine Ashford sat in their formal living room, listening as Dr. Morrison explained the next steps in their daughter's treatment. Given Isabella's continued deterioration and refusal to cooperate with outpatient treatment, we have no choice but to proceed with involuntary commitment, the doctor explained. The ambulance will arrive this afternoon to transport her to the psychiatric facility. Catherine's hands shook as she clutched a tissue. "But she's just a child. Surely there must be something else we can try." "Mrs. Ashford, your daughter's life is in danger. At this point, forced nutrition is the only option to prevent permanent organ damage or death." Richard stood abruptly, his businessman's mind racing. "What are the success rates for these interventions? What guarantee do we have that this approach will work?" The social worker, a kind-faced woman named Ms. Thompson, spoke up. "Mr. Ashford, there are no guarantees. But without intervention, the outcome is predictable. Isabella needs immediate medical stabilization and psychological support." "How long would she be hospitalized?" Catherine asked through her tears. "That depends on her response to treatment. Typically, anywhere from several weeks to several months." The family sat in stunned silence, processing the reality of what lay ahead. Their beautiful daughter would be taken from their home and placed in a facility with other patients struggling with severe mental health issues. The thought was devastating to parents who had spent 17 years protecting her from any harm or discomfort. Upstairs, Maria knocked urgently on Isabella's door. "We need to talk right now," she said as she entered the room. They're taking me away today, aren't they? Isabella's voice was flat, resigned. This afternoon, Maria confirmed. But we still have time to try our plan. Are you willing to take the risk? Isabella looked at her reflection in the mirror across the room. Her once healthy appearance had been replaced by hollow cheeks and prominent collarbones. She barely recognized herself, and she realized that her silent protest had gone too far. What do I need to do? She asked, determination replacing despair in her voice. First, you need to eat something. I know it's hard, but you need strength for what's coming. Then, we're going to gather your art supplies and create something that shows your parents who you really are. Maria had spent the night thinking about how to break through years of miscommunication and emotional distance. Her plan was simple but risky. She would help Isabella create a visual representation of her inner world, then present it to her parents in a way they couldn't ignore or dismiss. I haven't painted in months, Isabella said weakly. I don't know if I can. You don't have to paint, Maria reassured her. You just have to be honest. Show them what they can't see. While Isabella gathered her art supplies from the closet where they had been hidden away, Maria went to the kitchen and prepared a simple meal, warm soup and fresh bread. Nothing fancy or overwhelming, just basic nourishment that Isabella's body desperately needed. When Maria returned to the bedroom with the food, she found Isabella sitting on the floor surrounded by sketchbooks, paint tubes, and canvases. For the first time in weeks, there was color in the teenager's cheeks and purpose in her movements. I forgot how much I missed this, Isabella said, opening a sketchbook filled with drawings from before her crisis began. The pages revealed a talented young artist with a keen eye for emotion and detail. Your work is beautiful, Maria said sincerely as she looked through the sketches. These aren't just drawings, they're stories. That's what I try to do, Isabella explained, taking a tentative spoonful of soup. I want to capture what people are feeling, not just what they look like. That's why I love art therapy. It helps people express things they can't say with words. As Isabella slowly worked on eating while sketching, Maria marveled at the transformation. With her hands busy creating and her mind focused on something she was passionate about, the young woman seemed to come alive again. It was as if the act of making art was feeding her soul while the soup nourished her body. Tell me about this one, Maria said, pointing to a sketch of a young girl behind what appeared to be golden bars. Isabella paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. I drew that about 6 months ago, before everything got really bad. It's how I felt at home, like I was trapped in a beautiful prison. Everyone could see the gold and luxury, but nobody noticed that I couldn't get out. And this one, Maria indicated another drawing of a figure reaching toward a distant light. That's about hope, I think. The idea that maybe someday someone would understand me. As they talked, Isabella continued eating small bites of soup and bread. It wasn't much, but it was progress. More importantly, she was engaging with life again instead of retreating from it. Maria, Isabella said suddenly, why are you doing this for me? You could lose your job. Maria set down the sketchbook and looked directly at Isabella. Because I see you, she said simply. I see a smart, talented, caring young woman who has been trying to tell her family that she's drowning, and nobody has been listening. I can't watch that happen to anyone's child. Tears filled Isabella's eyes. My parents will never understand. They think success means money and status. They can't see that I need something different. Then, we show them, Maria said firmly. We create something so clear and powerful that they can't look away or misunderstand. For the next several hours, Isabella worked on a new piece while Maria watched and occasionally offered encouragement. The artwork that emerged was unlike anything in Isabella's previous portfolio. Using mixed media, paint, charcoal, and even torn pieces of fabric, she created a visual diary of her emotional journey. The central image was a portrait of herself, but divided into 2 halves. One half showed the perfect daughter her parents saw, well-dressed, smiling, achieving. The other half revealed her inner reality, frightened, lonely, desperate to be truly known and loved. Around the central portrait, Isabella added smaller images that told her story. A young girl drawing alone in her room while adults attended business meetings downstairs. A teenager sitting at a dinner table surrounded by family, but feeling completely isolated. Hands reaching out, but finding no one to hold them. But the most powerful element was a series of images showing what Isabella dreamed of: herself working with children, using art to help them express their feelings, a family sitting together and actually talking, not just exchanging pleasantries, a young woman painting not for performance or achievement, but for the pure joy of creation. "This is incredible," Maria breathed as she watched the artwork take shape. "This shows everything you've been trying to say." As afternoon approached, they could hear increased activity downstairs. Voices in the hallway indicated that the hospital staff had arrived to collect Isabella. Time was running out. "Are you ready?" Maria asked. Isabella looked at her artwork, raw, honest, and more revealing than anything she had ever shared with her parents. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I'm ready." Maria helped Isabella clean up the art supplies and gather her courage. Then, she did something that went against every rule of domestic employment. She marched downstairs and interrupted the meeting between the Ashfords and the medical team. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashford," she said, her voice respectful but firm. "Before you make any final decisions about Isabella, there's something you need to see." Richard looked annoyed at the interruption. "Maria, this isn't the time. We're in the middle of important discussions about our daughter's medical care." "Sir, with respect, this is exactly the time," Maria replied. "Your daughter has something to show you, and I believe it will change your understanding of what she needs." Catherine looked confused. "Isabella wants to show us something? But she hasn't spoken to us in weeks." "She's been trying to speak to you for months," Maria said boldly. "Maybe not with words, but she's been trying. Please, just give her 10 minutes before you let them take her away." Dr. Morrison checked his watch impatiently. "I really don't think this is appropriate. Isabella needs immediate medical intervention, not more family drama." But something in Maria's tone caught Richard's attention. As a successful businessman, he had learned to recognize when someone was completely confident in their position. Maria wasn't pleading or begging. She was stating a fact with absolute certainty. 10 minutes, he agreed, standing up from his chair. "But then, we proceed as planned." Maria led the group upstairs to Isabella's room, her heart pounding. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Either this intervention would open the lines of communication that could save Isabella from hospitalization, or it would fail spectacularly and likely cost Maria her job. Isabella was waiting for them, sitting cross-legged on the floor next to her artwork. She looked small and fragile, but there was determination in her posture that hadn't been there in weeks. "Mom, Dad," she said quietly, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "I need you to see something. I need you to really see me." As the adults gathered around Isabella's artwork, a profound silence filled the room. For the first time, the Ashfords were seeing their daughter's inner world laid bare before them. Her pain, her dreams, her desperate need to be understood and accepted for who she truly was. The visual impact of Isabella's emotions translated into art hit her parents with a force that months of verbal explanations had failed to achieve. Catherine gasped softly as she recognized the loneliness and isolation depicted in the drawings, while Richard stared at the images of his daughter reaching out for connection that never came. "Isabella," Catherine whispered, tears streaming down her face. Did we do this to you?" For the first time in months, Isabella looked directly into her mother's eyes. Richard Ashford knelt down beside his daughter's artwork, his expensive suit wrinkling against the floor as he studied each image with the same intensity he typically reserved for million-dollar business deals. For the first time in months, he was seeing Isabella not as his heir apparent or a reflection of his own success, but as a young woman in tremendous pain. "You drew this today?" he asked, his voice unusually quiet. Isabella nodded, watching her father's face carefully. "Maria helped me find the courage to show you." Catherine had moved closer to examine the divided self-portrait, her manicured fingers hovering over the image of her daughter's hidden anguish. "Sweetheart, I had no idea you felt this way. Why didn't you tell us?" "I tried," Isabella whispered. "Remember last year when I wanted to talk about college? And the time I asked if we could have dinner without discussing business? And when I begged you to come to my art show at school instead of sending the driver?" The memories came flooding back to Catherine, each instance now viewed through the lens of her daughter's artwork. What she had dismissed as teenage drama or lack of focus was actually Isabella's desperate attempts to connect with her parents on a deeper level. Dr. Morrison shifted uncomfortably, checking his watch. While this is certainly illuminating, we still have a medical crisis to address. Isabella's physical condition requires immediate intervention. But Richard held up a hand to silence the doctor, his eyes still fixed on his daughter's art. What would happen, he asked slowly, if we postponed the hospitalization for a few days? If we could show that Isabella is starting to eat and engage again? Mr. Ashford, I strongly advise against any delays. Your daughter's condition is critical. But she ate today, Maria interjected, surprising everyone. Isabella had soup and bread this afternoon. It wasn't much, but it was more than she's had in weeks. Catherine's eyes widened. Is that true? You ate something? Isabella looked embarrassed, but nodded. When I was working on the artwork, I forgot to not eat. It just happened naturally. Ms. Thompson, the social worker, observed the family dynamics with professional interest. In her years of experience, she had learned that sometimes the most effective interventions came from unexpected sources. Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, what exactly are you proposing? Richard stood up, his business mind engaging with this new information. I'm proposing that we try a different approach. Instead of removing Isabella from our home, we work on fixing what's broken in our family. If she can eat when she feels understood and supported, then maybe that's the real treatment she needs. Absolutely not, Dr. Morrison protested. You're not qualified to treat an eating disorder. This is irresponsible and potentially dangerous. More dangerous than traumatizing her by forcing her into a psychiatric facility? Catherine asked, surprising herself with her defensive tone. Look at her, doctor. She's more engaged right now than she's been in months. Isabella watched this discussion with growing hope and terror. For the first time, her parents were fighting for her rather than simply trying to manage her. But she also feared that this moment of understanding was too fragile to withstand the pressure from medical authorities. What would I need to do? Isabella asked quietly. If you decided to give me another chance, what would you expect from me? Maria stepped forward, knowing that her next words could make or break everything. I think Isabella needs 3 things: time, understanding, and the freedom to be herself. Not performance-based love, but unconditional support while she figures out who she wants to become. And what about eating? Dr. Morrison demanded. You can't love an eating disorder away. No, Maria agreed. But you might be able to remove the reasons for it. If Isabella feels seen and valued for who she really is, maybe she won't need to use food as a way to be heard. Isabella looked at her parents with a mixture of hope and fear. Would you really be willing to try? To actually listen to me about what I want from my life? Richard and Catherine exchanged a look that communicated more than words could express. They were both realizing that their approach to parenting had been fundamentally flawed. They had provided everything money could buy but had failed to provide what Isabella needed most: genuine connection and acceptance. What do you want? Catherine asked, echoing the question Maria had posed the night before. Tell us what you really want. For Isabella, this was the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. I want to study art therapy. I want to work with kids who are struggling like I've been struggling. I want to have family dinners where we talk about feelings and dreams, not just achievements and business deals. I want you to be proud of me for who I am, not just what I accomplish. Is that all? Richard asked, and for a moment Isabella feared he was being sarcastic. But his tone was genuine, almost wondering. I want to feel like I matter to you, Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger. Not as an extension of your success or a reflection of your parenting, but as a person you actually enjoy spending time with. Catherine began crying in earnest now, not the delicate tears of a society lady, but the raw sobs of a mother who realized she had been failing her child for years. Oh, sweetheart, of course you matter to us. You're everything to us. But I haven't felt that way, Isabella said honestly. I felt like a project you were working on, not a daughter you were loving. The room fell silent as the weight of Isabella's words settled over everyone present. Dr. Morrison looked deeply uncomfortable with the emotional display, while Ms. Thompson took notes with professional detachment. But Maria watched the family with growing hope, recognizing the signs of genuine breakthrough. If we do this, Richard said finally. If we try to handle this at home, what would that look like? Maria found herself in the unexpected position of family counselor. It means you'd need to change how you communicate with Isabella. Instead of making plans for her life, you'd need to ask her about her plans. Instead of scheduling activities designed to improve her, you need to spend time together just because you enjoy each other's company. And the eating? Catherine asked. I think the eating will follow, Maria replied. When people feel nourished emotionally, they're more able to nourish themselves physically. But it might take time, and it might not be linear. Dr. Morrison shook his head firmly. This is highly irregular and medically inadvisable. I cannot in good conscience support this approach. Then, we'll find new doctors, Richard said with finality. Doctors who understand that our daughter needs more than force-feeding. She needs her family to heal. Miss Thompson looked up from her notes. Mr. Ashford, if you're serious about trying an alternative approach, there would need to be strict conditions. Daily check-ins with a medical professional, regular weight monitoring, and immediate hospitalization if Isabella's condition deteriorates further. I can agree to that, Isabella said quickly, if it means staying home and working things out with my family. And we need to see consistent progress, Miss Thompson continued. Not just with eating, but with overall engagement and cooperation with treatment. What kind of treatment? Catherine asked. Family therapy, Miss Thompson replied. Intensive work to address the communication patterns and expectations that contributed to this crisis. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. Richard looked at his watch, then at his daughter sitting surrounded by artwork that revealed years of hidden pain. Cancel my meetings for the rest of the week, he said to no one in particular. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Catherine looked surprised. You're going to take time off work? Our daughter almost died because we were too busy to notice she was drowning, Richard replied. Work can wait. Isabella felt a surge of hope unlike anything she had experienced in months. Her parents were choosing her over their business obligations, something she had never thought possible. There's one more thing, Isabella said hesitantly. I want Maria to be part of this. She's the one who helped me find my voice again. She's the one who saw what everyone else missed. Dr. Morrison looked appalled. You want to involve domestic staff in medical treatment? This is completely unprecedented. Maybe that's exactly why it might work, Catherine said thoughtfully. Everyone else has been treating Isabella like a case study. Maria has been treating her like a person. Maria felt overwhelmed by the trust being placed in her. I'm just a housekeeper, she protested. I don't have any training in family therapy or eating disorders. But you have something more important, Isabella said. You have common sense and compassion, and you listen without trying to fix everything immediately. Richard made his decision. Dr. Morrison, we appreciate your concern, but we're going to try this approach. We'll find medical professionals who can work with us rather than against us. The doctor gathered his papers with obvious disapproval. I'll need to document that you're refusing medical advice against my recommendation. If something happens to Isabella, the responsibility is entirely yours. The responsibility has always been ours, Catherine replied. We just forgot that for a while. As Dr. Morrison and Ms. Thompson prepared to leave, they outlined the specific conditions for allowing Isabella to remain at home. Daily weight checks, weekly blood work, immediate intervention if her condition worsened, and family therapy sessions beginning within 48 hours. And eating? Ms. Thompson asked Isabella directly. Can you commit to trying? Isabella looked at her parents, then at Maria, then back at the artwork that had finally given her a voice. I can commit to trying, she said, if they can commit to really seeing me. We commit, Richard and Catherine said almost simultaneously. After the officials left, the Ashford family found themselves alone with Maria in Isabella's bedroom, surrounded by art supplies and the remnants of an afternoon that had changed everything. The silence was different now, not the uncomfortable quiet of miscommunication, but the thoughtful pause of people processing profound change. What happens now? Isabella asked. Now we learn how to be a family, Catherine said softly. A real family, not just people who live in the same house and share the same name. It's not going to be easy, Richard added. We have years of bad habits to unlearn and new patterns to establish. 6 months later, the Ashford mansion looked the same from the outside, but everything within its walls had fundamentally changed. The formal dining room, once a stage for silent meals and uncomfortable evaluations of Isabella's eating habits, had been transformed into a warm gathering place where the family shared not just food, but stories, dreams, and honest conversations. Isabella sat at the breakfast table, her healthy weight restored and color back in her cheeks, discussing her college applications with her parents. On the table beside her plate, which she had cleaned without anyone watching or commenting, lay acceptance letters from 3 universities with excellent art therapy programs. The University of Vermont has the most established program, she was saying, but the internship opportunities at NYU are incredible. They partner with children's hospitals throughout the city. Richard, who 6 months earlier had dismissed art therapy as frivolous, now listened with genuine interest. What's your instinct telling you? Which program feels right for who you're becoming? The question itself represented a revolution in their family dynamics. Instead of telling Isabella what she should choose, Richard was asking her to trust her own judgment. It had taken months of family therapy and conscious effort to reach this point. I think NYU, Isabella replied thoughtfully. I want to stay close enough to visit home regularly, but far enough away to establish my own independence. Plus, the diversity of the program appeals to me. Catherine, who had learned to bite her tongue when her first impulse was to offer unsolicited advice, simply smiled. That sounds like a well-reasoned decision. What do you need from us to make it happen? The naturalness of these exchanges still amazed everyone involved. What had once required careful navigation and resulted in hurt feelings now flowed like normal family conversation. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. There had been setbacks, arguments, and moments when the old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But, with consistent effort and professional guidance, the Ashfords had learned to relate to each other as individuals rather than roles. Maria entered the dining room carrying fresh coffee, her position in the household having evolved dramatically over the months. She was no longer just the housekeeper but had become a trusted family friend whose wisdom and perspective were valued by everyone. The boundaries remained appropriate, but the respect was mutual and genuine. Good morning, everyone, she said, refilling coffee cups. How's the college decision coming along? Isabella's chosen NYU, Catherine announced proudly. We're going to visit the campus next week to finalize everything. Rosa will be so excited to hear that, Maria replied with a smile. She's been accepted to the education program at Teachers College there. The girls might end up being neighbors. This connection between the families had developed naturally as the Ashfords learned to see their staff as whole people with their own dreams and challenges. Richard had quietly arranged for a scholarship fund to help Rosa with her college expenses, not as charity, but as an investment in someone whose mother had saved their family. Isabella's relationship with food had normalized gradually as her emotional needs were met. The family now understood that her eating disorder had never really been about food at all, but about control, communication, and the desperate need to be seen and understood. As those underlying issues were addressed, her relationship with eating became healthy again. Speaking of Rosa, Isabella said, I've been thinking about something. What if we started a small art therapy program for kids in the community? Nothing formal, just weekend sessions where children can express themselves creatively while we're both home from college during breaks. Richard and Catherine exchanged a look of pride and amazement. Their daughter was not only planning her own future, but thinking about how to help others, the very quality they had always hoped to instill in her, but had never known how to nurture. That's a beautiful idea, Catherine said. What would you need to make it happen? Mostly space and supplies, Isabella replied. I was thinking we could convert the old pool house into a studio. It has good natural light and plenty of room. Consider it done, Richard said without hesitation. His approach to supporting Isabella's dreams had changed completely. Instead of questioning the value or practicality of her interests, he now looked for ways to enable them. The family therapy sessions that had begun in crisis mode had evolved into monthly check-ins that all 3 Ashfords genuinely looked forward to. Dr. Sarah Chun, the therapist who had replaced the dismissed Dr. Morrison, had helped them develop communication tools that served them well beyond the therapy room. You know what I'm most proud of? Isabella said suddenly, looking at both her parents. It's not that we fixed our problems. It's that we learned how to talk about them instead of pretending they didn't exist. I'm proud that we learned the difference between supporting your dreams and trying to live our dreams through you," Richard replied. "I spent so many years thinking that love meant ensuring your success, when it really meant ensuring your happiness." Catherine nodded in agreement. "I'm proud that we learned to value who you are instead of constantly trying to improve who you might become." These moments of reflection and gratitude had become common in the Ashford household. The family had developed a practice of regular appreciation exchanges, expressing not just love, but specific recognition of growth and positive changes. Maria finished her morning tasks and prepared to leave for her other responsibilities. Her role had expanded beyond housekeeping to include part-time coordination of the Ashfords' charitable activities and community outreach programs. The family's near loss of Isabella had sparked a desire to help other families avoid similar crises. "Before you go," Isabella called out, "I have something for you." She disappeared upstairs and returned with a beautifully framed artwork, a portrait of Maria's hands teaching Isabella to hold a paintbrush, titled "The Moment Everything Changed." "Isabella, this is gorgeous," Maria breathed, accepting the gift with tears in her eyes. "But you've already given us so much." "You saved my life," Isabella said simply. "This is just a thank you." "We saved each other's lives," Maria corrected gently. "You taught me that sometimes the most important job isn't the one you're paid for. You taught me to trust my instincts about what people really need." The bonds forged during those crisis weeks had created lasting changes for everyone involved. Maria had gained confidence in her own wisdom and judgment, while the Ashfords had learned to value different perspectives and approaches to problem-solving. As the months had passed, Isabella had gradually shared more details about the depression and anxiety that had preceded her eating disorder. She had been struggling with perfectionism, social isolation, and a deep fear that she was valued only for her achievements rather than her intrinsic worth. The family's wealth and high expectations had created pressure that she felt unable to communicate or escape. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Maria hadn't decided to bring me that first cup of milk," Isabella mused as they finished breakfast. "I think about that too," Catherine admitted. "We were so focused on medical solutions that we missed the human element entirely." "The doctors weren't wrong about the medical risks," Richard added, "but they were incomplete in their understanding of what you needed to heal." The integration of professional medical care with family-centered emotional support had proven to be the key to Isabella's recovery. She still saw a nutritionist monthly and had regular checkups to monitor her physical health, but the foundation of her wellness was the transformed family relationships. Isabella's artwork had continued to evolve throughout her recovery, becoming more hopeful and vibrant while maintaining its emotional honesty. She had created a series of pieces documenting her journey from despair to healing, which would be displayed at her high school senior art exhibition next month. "Are you nervous about the art show?" Maria asked. "A little," Isabella admitted. "It's pretty personal work to share publicly. But I think it's important for other kids to see that it's possible to come through dark times and find light again. And for other parents to see what their children might be trying to tell them," Catherine added. The upcoming art exhibition had become a family project, with Richard and Catherine taking active roles in setting up the display and attending not as obligatory parents but as genuine supporters of Isabella's artistic voice. Their pride in her work was authentic and unconditional, based on admiration for her talent and courage rather than reflected glory. As the morning progressed, each family member prepared for their day with a sense of purpose and connection that had been absent for years. Richard headed to work, but would be home for dinner, a commitment he now kept religiously. Catherine prepared for her volunteer work at a local family counseling center, inspired by their own experience to help other families in crisis. Isabella spent the afternoon in her converted studio space, working on pieces for her college portfolio while also preparing materials for the community art program she planned to launch. Her artwork now reflected not just personal healing, but a vision for helping others find their own voices through creative expression. The transformation of the Ashford family had ripple effects throughout their community. Their story, shared discreetly through their therapist's professional network, had influenced other families facing similar challenges. The idea that wealth and success could coexist with emotional struggles was slowly gaining recognition in their social circles. That evening, as had become their tradition, the family gathered for dinner without distractions. No phones, no business discussions, no agenda beyond enjoying each other's company and sharing the events of their day. The conversation flowed easily between serious topics and lighthearted banter, a natural rhythm that had developed as they learned to trust each other with both vulnerabilities and joys. "I had lunch with Dr. Chin today," Catherine mentioned as they shared dessert. "She said something interesting about our progress." "What's that?" Isabella asked. "She said that most families come to therapy to fix problems, but we learned to fix relationships. The problems resolved themselves once we got the relationships right." "That makes sense," Richard mused. "In business, I've learned that if you take care of your people, they take care of everything else. I should have applied that wisdom at home years ago. The important thing is that we learned it at all," Isabella said. "Some families never figure it out." As they cleaned up from dinner together, another new tradition that emphasized shared responsibility and mutual care, the conversation turned to future plans and dreams. Isabella talked about her excitement for college and her long-term vision of opening a treatment center that combined traditional therapy with creative arts. Richard shared updates about a new foundation he was establishing to support families in crisis. Catherine discussed her growing involvement in advocacy for mental health awareness among adolescents. Their individual goals were now interconnected and supportive rather than competitive or isolating. They had learned to celebrate each other's successes without feeling threatened or diminished by them. Later that evening, as Isabella worked on homework in the family room while her parents read nearby, Maria stopped by with final preparations for the next day's schedule. These informal evening visits had become a cherished part of everyone's routine. Rosa called to ask if Isabella would like to join her for a college preparation workshop next weekend, Maria mentioned. "They're covering everything from dorm room setup to managing academic stress." "I'd love that," Isabella replied immediately. Rosa always has such practical insights about handling pressure and staying grounded. The friendship that had developed between the two young women was based on mutual respect and shared values rather than similar backgrounds. Rosa's perspective as someone who had overcome significant obstacles through education and hard work provided Isabella with role models beyond her wealthy social circle. "It's remarkable how much our lives have all changed," Catherine reflected as Maria prepared to leave. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this level of peace and connection in our family." "The foundation was always there," Maria replied wisely. "You just needed to clear away the barriers that were preventing you from seeing each other clearly." As the evening wound down, each family member reflected privately on how far they had traveled from those dark days when Isabella's life hung in the balance. The journey had required courage from everyone. Isabella's courage to be vulnerable, her parents' courage to change their approach to parenting, and Maria's courage to step beyond her prescribed role to help heal a broken family. The story of the millionaire's daughter who wouldn't eat had become the story of a family who learned to nourish each other in all the ways that truly mattered. Their wealth remained, but it was no longer their primary source of identity or security. They had discovered that the most valuable possessions were the connections they had built with each other and the trust they had learned to share. As Isabella prepared for bed that night, she paused at her bedroom window and looked out over the estate grounds. The same view that had once seemed like a beautiful prison now looked like home, a place where she was known, loved, and free to become whoever she was meant to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but she would face them with the knowledge that she was not alone and never had to be again. "But we're going to do it together," Isabella said, and for the first time in months, there was genuine hope in her voice. Maria quietly began cleaning up the art supplies, but Catherine stopped her. "Maria, we can't thank you enough for what you've done today. You saved our daughter's life." "You all saved each other," Maria replied. "I just helped you find a way to talk." As evening fell over the Ashford estate, the family faced an uncertain but hopeful future. The road to healing would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, they would be traveling it together. The foundation of trust and understanding that had been built that afternoon would need to be strengthened and maintained. But the most important step had been taken. They had finally, truly seen each other. "Just wanted you to see me," she said simply. "Not the perfect daughter you created, but the real me. The one who loves art and wants to help other kids and sometimes gets sad and scared and doesn't know how to handle the pressure of being perfect all the time." The room remained silent as the enormity of their family's breakdown became clear to everyone present. The expensive doctors and treatments had missed the core issue entirely. Isabella didn't need to be fixed. She needed to be seen, heard, and loved for who she really was. Dr. Morrison looked uncomfortable with the emotional display. "This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the medical reality. Isabella still needs immediate treatment for her eating disorder." But Maria was watching the Ashfords' faces, and she could see that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since Isabella's crisis began, her parents were truly seeing their daughter as a person rather than a problem to be solved. Maria felt tears threaten to spill over. "Tomorrow, we change everything," she promised. "But tonight, we take it one sip at a time." As Isabella finished half the mug of milk, more nutrition than she had consumed in days, both women knew they were embarking on something that would either heal this family or potentially cost Maria her job. But sometimes the most important risks were the ones taken out of love rather than logic. Outside Isabella's window, the estate's grounds lay peaceful under the moonlight. But inside the mansion, the foundation for a dramatic confrontation was being quietly laid. Tomorrow would test everyone's courage, but tonight marked the first small victory in Isabella's journey back from the edge of despair. "Would you like me to bring you some warm milk tomorrow night?" she asked. "We could talk again if you want." Isabella nodded slowly, the first sign of hope she had shown in weeks. "I'd like that." As Maria walked to the bus stop that night, she felt the weight of what she had taken on. She was just a housekeeper, but somehow she had become the bridge between a suffering teenager and the family who loved her but didn't know how to reach her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for the first time since Isabella's crisis began, there was reason for hope. The seeds of healing had been planted in the most unlikely of ways, not through expensive doctors or specialists, but through the simple act of one person truly listening to another's pain. What happened next would test everyone involved. But the foundation for recovery had been quietly laid in a teenager's bedroom as the rest of the world slept.